Lewis dot structures. Lewis structures are an important way of representing bonding, particularly covalent bonding. Lines are used to represent a pair of electrons that are being shared. Individual dots, drawn in pairs, are used to represent electrons that are not being shared by the atoms. There are several key points to drawing Lewis structures. The first is that we need to know the total number of valence electrons that the structure has. All of these valence electrons must be shown in the structure for it to be considered correct. We determine these from the valence configuration, or alternatively, from the group the atom is in. The number of valence electrons corresponds to the tall columns of the periodic table. Groups 1 and 2 have 1 and 2 valence electrons. Groups 13 through 18 have 3 through 8 valence electrons. In the example, the phosphorus has 5 valence electrons, and each chlorine atom has 7 valence electrons, for a total of 26. If the species is an ion, a polyatomic ion like, for example, CO3 2-, then you need to add as many electrons as the negative charge to get the correct number of electrons. If the ion is positively charged, then subtract the number of electrons equal to the positive charge to get the correct number of electrons. The second important point is that the most common structure that occurs when a single atom of one element is in a compound with several atoms of another element is a structure with a single atom in the center of the others. So in the example of PCl3, the phosphorus is drawn in the middle of 3 chlorine atoms. While it is certainly possible to draw other structures, and some of them exist, the central atom surrounded by others is by far the most common for simple molecular compounds. The central atom is initially attached to each of the other atoms by a single bond containing 2 electrons. We keep track of the number of electrons so that we know where we are. In this example, there are now 20 electrons left. Next, we start filling in the octets of the outside atoms with the remaining electrons, keeping track of what is left. In the example, each chlorine atom takes 6 of the electrons, for a total of 18, leaving only 2 left. If we still have electrons, we add them to the central atom. In the example, the 2 remaining electrons add to the phosphorus to fill its valence shell. The structure that is produced has the correct number of electrons, and everything has a filled shell, an octet. But what happens if you run out of electrons before you fill everything up? In the case shown here, hydrogen has 1 valence electron, carbon has 4, and nitrogen has 5, for a total of 10 electrons. 4 are in the bonds, and 6 are added to nitrogen to fill its valence shell. But we have now run out of electrons, and carbon does not have a filled shell. In that case, you need to make more bonds, because shared electrons help fill the valence shells of both atoms, so fewer electrons are needed. We move electrons from the nitrogen to make enough bonds to fill the carbon. In general, make multiple bonds with the central atom until everything is filled. There are 5 Lewis structures to draw for the problem sheet for this part of the lesson.